The sun dipped low over the rolling hills of my ranch, casting a golden glow across the sprawling acres of Karen County. My land, a patchwork of wildflower meadows and ancient oak groves, had been in my family for 3 generations. It wasn't just dirt and grass, it was my blood, my sweat, my every waking thought. I, Jack Harlan, was a stubborn fool for this place, and I'd sooner die than let it slip through my fingers. But the Karens had other plans. Oh, did they ever? It started with a letter, crisp and official, stamped with the logo of the Karen County Homeowners Association. I'd never joined their little club. Me ranch was outside their gated McMansion sprawl, but that didn't stop them from claiming dominion. The letter informed me, in the politest legalese, that the HOA had acquired a portion of my land for a community enhancement project. No consultation, no permission, just a smug declaration that they'd be building a luxury resort on my northern pasture. I laughed, crumpled the paper, and tossed it into the fire. They'd clearly lost their minds. But the next morning, I woke to the roar of bulldozers. I grabbed my hat, stormed out, and found a swarm of construction workers tearing up my land like it was their personal sandbox. A woman in a crisp blazer, clutching a clipboard, strutted toward me. Her smile was all teeth, her hair a helmet of blonde perfection. "Mr. Harlan, I'm Karen Vanderwip, HOA president. We're so excited about the Karen Serenity Resort. It'll bring such value to the community." "This is my land," I growled, pointing at the churned-up earth. "You can't just waltz in and build your tacky spa here." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, but we can. Eminent domain, darling. The county approved it. Your little ranch is now part of a greater vision." She handed me a stack of permits, each one stamped with official seals. My stomach sank. This wasn't a prank. These people had the law, or at least a twisted version of it, on their side. I spent weeks fighting. I hired a lawyer, a grizzled old man named Pete who smelled like whiskey and regret. He pored over the documents, muttering about loopholes and corruption. "Jack," he said one night over beers at the local dive, "these Karens have friends in high places. The county commissioner's in their pocket, and the permits are airtight. You could sue, but it'll take years and every dime you've got." "So what do?" I asked, staring into my empty glass. Pete leaned in, his eyes glinting. "Play dirty. They think they've won. Let 'em. Then hit 'em where it hurts." I didn't sit right with me. I wasn't the scheming type. But as I drove back to the ranch, watching cranes hoist steel beams over my land, something shifted. The Karens didn't just want my pasture, they wanted to erase me. My family's name, our legacy, gone under their manicured claws. If they thought Jack Harlan was some pushover, they were about to learn otherwise. I started small. I'd ride my horse, Rusty, through their construction site at dawn, spooking the workers and leaving hoofprints in their fresh concrete. I'd blast country music from my barn at midnight, knowing it'd drift to their fancy new resort and ruin their beauty sleep. Petty, sure, but it felt good. Karen Vanderwip would show up every few days, her smile cracking at the edges, begging me to be reasonable. I'd just tip my hat and say, "Ma'am, I'm just enjoying my property." Then came the twist I didn't see coming. One morning, as I was sipping coffee on my porch, a beat-up VW bus rolled up my driveway. Out stepped a wiry old woman with a braid of silver hair and a tie-dye shirt that looked older than me. She introduced herself as Juniper, a drifter who'd heard about my HOA troubles through some hippie grapevine. "I'm here to save your land," she said, lighting a cigarette. "But I can make those Karens' lives hell." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or call the cops. But there was a mischief in Juniper's eyes that I couldn't resist. She moved into a tent on my south pasture, claiming she was commune with the land's spirit. Within days, she'd turned my ranch into a magnet for every oddball in a 50-mile radius. Hippies, activists, even a guy who played the didgeridoo at sunrise. They set up camp, chanting about land rights and corporate greed, all while Karen's resort loomed closer to completion. The Karens were livid. Karen Vanderwip marched over with a sheriff's deputy, demanding I clear out the squatters. But Juniper, sharp as a tack, had already filed for a public gathering permit. "We're exercising our right to assemble," she said, handing over paperwork that mirrored the HOA's tactics. The deputy, clearly amused, tipped his hat and left. Karen's face was a shade of red I didn't know existed. Juniper's chaos bought me time, but it didn't stop the resort. By spring, the Karen Serenity Resort stood completely a gaudy sprawl of glass and fake waterfalls, built on my stolen land. I was out of moves, or so I thought. One night, Pete called. "Jack, I found it," he said, his voice trembling with glee. "A loophole. The county's eminent domain claim? It's bunk. They misfiled the property lines. The resort's sitting on your land. All right, but the permits cover the wrong parcel. Legally, you still own it." I sat there, stunned. "So what does that mean?" "It means," Pete said, "you can sell the land out from under them. The resort, the buildings, everything theory yours to do with as you please." A plan formed, wild and ruthless. I didn't tell Juniper or her hippie brigade. I didn't even tell my sister, who'd been nagging me to move on. I contacted a real estate mogul named Vince Russo, a shark who'd been eyeing Karen County for years. Over whiskey at his penthouse, I laid it out. My ranch, including the shiny new resort, was for sale. Vince's eyes lit up like a slot machine. "You're telling me I can buy a fully built resort for pennies on the dollar? What's the catch?" "No catch," I said, grinning. "Just some very unhappy Karens." We closed the deal in secret. Vince paid me $15 million more money than I'd ever dreamed of. The ink was barely dry when I drove to the HOA's office, a sleek building that reeked of lavender and entitlement. Karen Vanderwip was there, sipping a latte, oblivious to the storm coming. "Morning, Karen," I said, tossing a folder on her desk. "You built your resort on my land. My lawyer found the mistake, and I just sold it all to Vince Russo. He owns your precious resort now." Her latte slipped from her hand, splashing across her desk. You can't do that," she stammered. "Already did," I said, tipping my hat. "Enjoy your new landlord." I walked out, her screams echoing behind me. The hippies cheered as I drove past their camp, but I didn't stop. I'd won, but the victory felt hollow. My ranch was gone. The land my granddaddy worked, the place I'd buried my wife's ashes under the big oak, it was Russo's now. I'd beaten the Karens, but at what cost? The dust hadn't settled on my deal with Vince Russo when the fallout began. Karen County buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. The HOA called an emergency meeting, and Karen Vanderwip, now sporting a frazzled ponytail instead of her usual helmet of perfection, stood before a crowd of outraged homeowners. I wasn't there, but Juniper, ever the instigator, snuck in and live-streamed it to her hippie followers. Karen's voice cracked as she ranted about legal betrayal and injustice. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Back at my temporary Dixa-rented cabin on the edge of town, I tried to savor the victory. $15 million sat in my bank account, a number so absurd I checked it daily, half expecting it to vanish. But every night, as I stared at the ceiling, the weight of what I'd lost pressed harder. My ranch wasn't just land. It was where I'd taught my daughter, Ellie, to ride horses before she moved to the city. It was where my wife, Clara, had laughed under the stars before cancer stole her. Selling it felt like selling my soul. Juniper showed up a week later, her VW bus rattling like it was on its last legs. She plopped onto my porch with a bottle of cheap wine and a grin. "You're a legend, Jack," she said, pouring me a glass. "The Karens are imploding. Half the HOA board resigned, and Russo's already hiking their resort fees." I forced a smile. Good. They had it coming. She squinted at me, her mischief fading. "You don't look like a man who just won. What's eating you?" I didn't answer. How could I explain that beating the Karens hadn't filled the hole they'd carved out of me? Juniper didn't press. Instead, she pulled out a tattered photo from her pocket, a younger her, standing on my ranch, next to a man who looked eerily like my granddaddy. "This place meant something to me too," she said softly. "I grew up here, before your family bought it. My dad worked the fields." I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. "You never said you had history here." "Didn't think it mattered." She shrugged, but her eyes were distant. "When I heard the Karens were stealing it, I came back. Not just for you, but for me. For him." She tapped the photo. "Your granddaddy was good to us. I figured I owed him one." That was the second twist, the one I hadn't seen coming. Juniper wasn't just a drifter, she was tied to my land's past, a ghost of its history. Her fight wasn't random, it was personal. I wanted to be angry she'd kept it secret, but I couldn't. She'd given me time to pull off the sale, even if it cost me everything. The next morning, I drove to the ranch, or what was left of it. Russo had already slapped his logo on the resort, and the northern pasture was crawling with tourists in golf carts. I parked near the big oak where Clara's ashes lay, now fenced off as part of the resort's Serenity Grove. A security guard eyed me, but I didn't care. I sat under the tree, whispering to Clara like she could hear me. "I'm sorry," I said. I didn't know what else to do. That's when Ellie showed up. My daughter, now a lawyer in Denver, hadn't visited in years. She stood there in her city boots, arms crossed, looking more like her mother than ever. "Dad," she said, "what the hell did you do?" I blinked. "How'd you know I was here?" "Juniper called me." She sat beside me, her voice softer. "She said you're falling apart. And I saw the news. You sold the ranch?" "Our ranch." I told her everything: the HOA's land grab, the loophole, the sale. She listened, her face unreadable. When I finished, she sighed. "You didn't tell me because you knew I'd stop you." "Stop me?" I frowned. "Ellie, they stole our land. I took it back." "You didn't take it back," she said, her voice sharp. "You gave it away. To Russo, of all people." "Dad, I could have fought this in court. I know people. I have connections. We could have kept the ranch." Her words hit like a sledgehammer. I'd been so focused on revenge, so sure I was out of options, that I hadn't even called my own daughter. I thought I was protecting it. I mumbled. "You were protecting your pride." She stood, brushing dirt off her jeans. "I'm not saying the Karens were right. They're awful. But you let them turn you into someone you're not. Granddaddy wouldn't have sold out. Neither would Mom." She left me there, under the oak, her words echoing. I'd won the battle, but I'd lost the war. The Karens were humiliated, sure, but I'd handed my legacy to a corporate vulture. Russo was already planning condos on the southern pasture. My land, my home, was gone. Weeks passed. I avoided Juniper, ignored Pete's calls, and dodged the local reporters sniffing for a story. Karen Vanderwip tried to sue me, claiming emotional distress, but her case fell apart when Pete leaked the misfiled permits to the press. The HOA dissolved amid scandals, and Karen moved to Florida, or so I heard. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. I felt empty. One day, I found a letter in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was a deed not for my ranch, but for a small plot of land nearby, 20 acres of untouched meadow. A note was tucked in, written in Juniper's messy scrawl. "Bought this with my savings. It's not your ranch, but it's a start. Plant something new. For Clara." I drove to the plot that afternoon. It was modest, nothing like my sprawling acres, but it had good soil and a creek running through. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. I started small, planting wildflowers and building a cabin with my own hands. Ellie visited more often, helping me hammer nails and argue over paint colors. She never said she forgave me, but she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Juniper dropped by too, bringing her hippie friends to bless the land with sage and bad guitar music. I rolled my eyes, but secretly, I was grateful. The resort, meanwhile, tanked. Russo's greed drove away customers, and a viral video of Karen Vanderwip's meltdown didn't help. Last I heard, he was selling it at a loss. I didn't gloat. I was too busy tending my new land, coaxing life from the dirt. It wasn't the same, and it never would be. But it was mine. Looking back, I see the bitter truth. The Karens were wrong, arrogant, entitled, and ruthless. But I was wrong too. I let their greed ignite mine, trading my roots for revenge. The millions in my account felt like blood money, a reminder of what I'd sacrificed. I donated half to a land trust, hoping to protect other ranches from HOAs and vultures. The rest, I saved for Ellie, for her future. The story ends here, under a new sky, with new scars. I beat the Karens, but I lost myself. And that's the real cost of winning a war you didn't need to fight. What do you think? Was Jack right to sell the ranch and outsmart the HOA, or did he lose more than he gained? Were the Karens the true villains, or did Jack's revenge make him one too? Share your thoughts. What's the line between justice and destruction?